welcome to another episode of Music in Paranoid Times. I'm Al. I'm here with my awesome co-host, Juliette.
Our guest today is the extraordinarily talented and charismatic Cristina Fernandes, co-founder.
Thank you.
Oh, you are so welcome. Co-founder, owner, and publicist of one of Canada's leading independent music publicity companies, Listen Harder. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. We've known each other for quite a while, so it's really nice to be able to do this with you.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. We really have known each other forever. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You formed Listen Harder back in 2004, correct?
Yes, officially. I was doing indie publicity before then, but 2004 is when we incorporated and named the company Listen Harder, which is a play on hard music, really, because we've done a lot of punk and hardcore metal, as you know, Juliette. So yeah, it's a little play on Listen Harder, thanks to a gentleman named Mitch Joel, who coined that phrase for distort. And I asked him if we could borrow it for the company, and he was like, yes, just take it. So
absolutely. Yeah. So, and then Listen Harder is you and your longtime friend and business partner, Jen Simic.
Yes.
And I guess you both had worked quite a few years in the industry before coming together, joining forces, and doing that. I know you were with Sony, DMD Entertainment.
Yeah, what I did at the time, I was freelancing, I was contracting.
Okay.
And I actually met Jen. She was interning at DMD, and that's how I met her. And we just figured out we had a love of music, like shared love of certain artists, and it's just a very similar philosophy with how to work with people. And so yeah, when I left to just do my own thing, she said, I want to come with you. And I was like, yes.
Love that. Join forces.
Yeah. And we also have Jessica Santa, who has been working with us for the last 2.5 years now. And she's fantastic. And she just rounds out our team really, really nicely. But Jen and I are the core of the company.
Love it. And you guys have had, an incredible artist roster going for, a number of years now. You've got Juno, Grammy winners, platinum selling artists. I know you guys have worked with Alexa on Fire, Bare Naked Ladies.
17 years, Juliette.
Yeah, crazy.
Al, can you believe that?
That's
I started
crazy.
working with those boys early 2003. 2 of them were still 17 years old.
When they were boys.
When they were literally boys. Yeah.
One of the staple bands for me growing up. So I love those
sure.
guys.
Oh, that's
That
awesome.
band.
Same. I have so many memories of seeing them, and so many times. So many times. And that their last show, I don't know, who else, were you at their last show?
I was at all of their, I'm at
every
all
single
of
one
their
of them?
shows. Yeah. They are, and I don't think anyone that we work with would get upset that I'd say this, they are my favorite live band.
You know what? I was actually going to ask you that in our rapid fire section at the end, but you beat me to it. So that's,
you can ask me favorite concert. That'll be totally different. But as far as like, a band, I have to pick them from just the first goosebumps that I got seeing them in this small room, and kids were losing their minds. And I was just like, what is happening? What am I witnessing right now? To, just Cops and the amphitheater, and just to be with them through that ride. It's just been, that show in those small clubs are just as memorable for me and exciting as, the first time they hit the amphitheater stage.
For sure. There's a lot of that energy. And that last block of shows when they did that sort of, I guess it was a farewell tour.
They had a farewell tour, and then they did
a
some
reunion.
shows at Danforth. They've put out a couple of songs.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed, we'll see more from them in the future.
For sure. And you went on to work with Dallas and with City and Color, and you've had the Lumineers on your roster, and so many other artists. So needless to say, you've been at it for a minute. That's for sure. Yeah. So, but you've probably seen the industry change and adapt. Over that course of time, especially I guess between the 90s when you started out and through into the 2000s. I think it's fair to say that in spite of all of that, you've probably not seen anything as far as change, what came with the pandemic anyways. Like there was no way to prepare for that.
No.
So maybe you can kind of take us through your experience a bit and working, with your artists as a music publicist as COVID hit. What were you doing at that time?
I'll tell you one little story before because you'll find this, and both of you will find this really amusing. Many, many years ago, it would have been like 2005 or so, maybe. I was working with Alexis. I sent a note to media people saying, hey, we have the capacity to send you music digitally. How about we do that? Because at the time, mail outs were just so expensive. And especially if you're an independent band. I mean, Al, because you're in a band, it can get pretty expensive when you have those kinds of costs. I mean, we'd be looking at $500, $600 to do mail outs. Yeah. And we also know that most of those CDs would just end up in the garbage, right? Unfortunately, but that's the reality. And I remember the pushback that I got. That was like the craziest idea anyone had at the time. So yeah, there you go. As far as the pandemic, I was 2 days from getting on a plane to go to the Junos, like many industry people. And I was going with Dallas Green's team because Dallas was performing. And some people were already there. I mean, obviously the Juno people were already there, but some industry people had left on the Wednesday. Some were at the airport looking at their email going, am I getting on this plane or not? Thankfully, we were supposed to leave on Friday. So I remember the Monday after Juno weekend so vividly because everyone was just in limbo.
Totally.
And I'm sure you guys felt the same way. And I know it's not unique to our industry, but we were just in limbo is really the best way to put it. And then we started having conversations about what are we going to do? Are we going to have to postpone a tour? Are we going to have to move record releases? Well, maybe we'll postpone the tour till the summer because surely by the summer, I'm sure everyone was having these conversations and no one had any answers. We didn't understand at the time, how things would be playing out, obviously. So I think at that point, that week, the gravitas of the situation started sinking in. And then those conversations became a little bit more like, okay, we're probably going to push this back, that sort of thing. And I guess it's interesting because I think of who's been, profoundly affected within our industry. And obviously it's promoters, venues, independent artists who make a living on the road. They're not making money from streams necessarily. They don't necessarily have that much music out there where they can get performance royalty, but they make a living on the road. And it was really scary to think about all of our peers and friends and how they were affected. But I have to tell you, from our point of view, once we got through that week, we've been as busy as we always are. You wouldn't know other than we're not pitching coverage for live shows. Yeah. That from a busyness point of view, I don't know if that's a word, there was a pandemic really. Yeah. So, yeah.
Was there something, so obviously that's great that you're keeping busy. Is there something that you guys had to do initially to just pivot a little bit to, pivot for the business and for what you guys do? Was there a lull period where you're like, oh, like what are we going to do right now in this moment?
Yes. And we acted really, really quickly. I'm good friends with Charlotte Thompson, who owns Red Umbrella. She is a very well-respected publicist. She's amazing.
We work with Charlotte.
She's their publicist.
So, love Charlotte. And I know some people might think, oh, it's weird, competition. No, those are old school days. She actually did an interview with Larry LeBlanc for Celebrity Access, where she summarizes this experience way better than I could ever do it. So I highly recommend going to read it. But she did mention in her interview with Larry about how our companies came together, because we were having conversations too. And so we put our heads together, collectively reached out to our media partners and just tried to come up with creative solutions to keep our artists supported, especially if they had releases and that sort of thing coming up. As you can imagine, media guys were like, how are we supposed to do TV interviews? We don't have a studio. Yeah. There's no concerts. What is Zoom? What's Zoom?
Remember that moment.
Yeah. So, so we were, so they'd reach out, we'd reach out. So Charlotte would say, okay, this outlet's doing this. And we'd be like, okay, this outlet's going to do this and there. So I think working together collaboratively made such a huge difference, especially because I had a record coming out March 27th for Vanessa Carlton, Love is an Art on Dine Alone. And now, as you guys, I'm sure, are aware, since you're in the industry, we don't start doing advanced press for a record 2 weeks before. We've been working on that record for weeks and weeks, but she was coming through town April 9th to perform.
Wow.
And we obviously had in-person stuff set up to help promote her record, because of, the bulk of a lot of the publicity we want to land around the actual record release,
sure.
right? And so they wanted to keep, at that point, she's been working on this record for 2 years. Vanessa Carlton is so lovely. She is the loveliest human being. Not only is she talented, she's really smart and funny. So it's been really lovely working with her. And I always enjoy it when she comes through town and we can do press stuff together. But I mean, she'd been working on this record for 2 years. She's like, her team's like, let's just run with it. And we were able to, thanks to the quick feed of our media partners, flip these things into virtual interviews pretty quickly. And we also got her to do IG takeovers. She did an IG live thing of her own. And thankfully our print and online media people helped support the record a lot.
Amazing.
So it actually, I have to say that it was that campaign when we wrapped just, at the end of March, I guess early in, into April, I had the thought, okay, we're going to be okay. We're okay.
It sort of became the blueprint for you guys a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So, so that's pretty much, that was kind of like, and obviously that's from a publicist perspective. The show must go on, right? Music and entertainment has seen us through so many hard times. We still have to put out music. Artists are making music, and these entertainment shows have to put on a show. So it was just kind of cool that everyone just, put their heads together and just supported each other as much as possible to get through.
Yeah, I think that's it's funny to your earlier point. I think the music industry is sometimes sometimes resistant to change, and we're so used to doing things, a certain way and maybe nostalgic for the good old days. But I think we're also really collaborative. So I guess I'm curious how you've seen, obviously in collaborating with, people from various other facets of the industry, how have you seen the industry at large shift, in light of the pandemic?
Probably a better question for promoters and artist managers and live venues, because I really have a more narrow point of view.
Has it changed the way you interact with people from other facets of the industry? It changes the way that you do business with promoters, or with, because of the way that we've all sort of, are in limbo in a way?
I have to tell you, I don't deal directly with promoters. So that's what artist managers are for. We deal specifically with, we might deal directly with an artist, but mostly it's through labels and artist managers or the artist team. And I have to say, funny enough, a lot more phone calls, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Obviously Zoom or video, Google Meets, whatever they are. But it's been cool just realizing how much that human connection is important. And these are people that I just adore, and I get to see once in a while because I'll be at their studio or I'll be at CBCQ or whatever. And I get to see, the people that, I really adore, that we work closely with. And that's been weird because it's not like, well, we can't hang out with them anyways, but it's not like we're super close, but I have to say that's been cool. A lot more phone conversations, getting to know people a little bit more. People have their guards down a little bit less. They're a little bit more open about their personal life and what's going on. And that's been kind of a cool thing, like a good thing, I think.
If you're an artist or in a band, when do you think is a good time to hire a publicist?
That's a really great question, Al, and I get asked that a lot. Jen and I have a philosophy. And I'm not suggesting this makes us better or whatever than anyone else. It's just the way we've always been. And I don't know how many other publicists may roll other than the people that I'm, good friends with. But when someone hits us up asking for publicity, sometimes we'll get an email that's like, hey, we want to hire you. Here's our record. Here's our timeline. And without being a jerk or sounding like a jerk, I have to kind of find a way to say, you can't just hire us. Like, what, send us your music. What's the timeline? So, because two of the more important things for us to consider taking on an artist is it has to resonate with us musically. Do I love this? Can I promote this to people who know that I'm in the habit of sharing things with them that I really believe in? So do we believe in it? Is that merit? It might not be something that I will listen to every day of my life, but is there a good team? Are the people good? Where are they at? And then, of course, do we have time? Because if we get booked in advance pretty quickly. So if we're really booked, we're not doing your artist any favors by taking a project on just cause. So we're just really conscientious about that. And I've had lots of conversations with independent bands. I will take the time to speak to a lot of indie artists, even though we're not going to work with them. I will say, do you want to get on the horn for 15 minutes? Because I feel like back in the day when I was starting my career, there was a couple of people who were really great about doing that with me. And it's just made all the difference.
It really does.
To some of the, and of course,
that's great.
Some of these artists or whatever, then they become like editors or, and they'll always look at us.
They'll remember that you gave them the time of day.
Yeah. So,
especially,
and that's not why you should do things, but
treat
everyone like you want to be treated is
exactly.
my kind of my motto. So I find spending 10, 15 minutes and just explaining to them, this is the reality. This is our media landscape. There's more releases. There's less media to cover, especially in our territory. And you don't need to spend money on a publicist right now. It's just going to be, you're not going to get the return on investment. You should do this, this, and this, maybe do this on your, so I'll kind of guide them. I mean, back in the day, we know there's a lot of bands who were DIY that would do a lot of book their own shows. And so it's not so different outside of just managing expectations and just being clear that just because you have your first 4 songs, no one knows who you are. You don't need a publicist.
Right.
You do not need a publicist. You can do the work yourself. You can, and it's probably good for you to learn what are the outlets, who writes about music that's similar to ours, that's really important process. I guess just simply, it's just if you haven't really done a show, if you've only put out a couple of songs and you're ready to put out an EP, I don't think it makes sense to engage a publicist and spend that kind of money. There's a lot of stuff you can do on your own before you get to that point.
I think that honestly says so much about the character of your company, because ultimately it's your business at the end of the day. And the fact that you're, willing to, take time to kind of paint an accurate picture of the landscape for, somebody who's maybe still learning, and not necessarily taking that on as business, I think says so much about you guys. Because, and I know, and I remember back in the day, like when we first met each other, and when I was first starting out, you were always great about, answering all my emails and, I'm not an artist, but the point is that like, I never felt like I wasn't somebody that could talk to you guys.
Right.
Never felt like you were annoying her.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
you've done wonderful things to support our artists, but I mean, again, that goes back to treat everyone like you want to be treated.
That's great.
And also, like, again, this is not why you do stuff, but once in a while, Jen and I will get an email from someone who was at a campus paper or a radio station that we were always kind to. You're not going to get an interview with Run the Jewels. It's not, you're not going to get one, but I'm going to write you back. And I'm going to say, that's really cool, but I'm sorry, we can't, or at least I'll, try to communicate. And then we'll get an email out of the blue 5 years later. And the person's like, I'm the editor for the Montreal Gazette. How's it going? And Jen and I are like, yes, because I know I've heard a lot of shitty stories
Yeah.
from people on how they have been treated by other publicists and labels. And I've never understood that.
Yeah.
I've never understood that kind of behavior. I don't care who you work with, Beyonce, whatever, just like some indie punk band. I don't care.
So with tours obviously still off in the distance, and, you know, it seems as though like the artists right now are all in the studio, stockpiling, creating music during this time, maybe getting ready to come out in the next year, hopefully.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that the artists that you work with aren't forgotten by their audience while they're creating right now, or while they're not in the spotlight, so to speak?
That's a really great question. I think there's a two-part answer to that. I'd start by saying that if an artist has a release coming out, there's artists who have campaigns that are ongoing, then it's business as usual, really.
Yeah.
We're putting out PRs, the label's efforts come into play, the artist's efforts come into play. So I don't think it's really a concern with that type of artist, because they have stuff out. They have a team that's helping them promote it. That's kind of taken care of, I guess. But if an artist is off cycle, and meaning, you know, they're in between, they don't have anything going on. They had an album out a couple of years ago. They're just not doing anything currently. I really think a lot of that has to come from the artist, Al. Mm-hmm. I'll explain what I mean. Obviously, this pandemic has affected everyone, and it's affected some people more profoundly than others, emotionally, mentally, and financially.
Sure.
So there are a lot of artists that don't want to do anything. They want to lay low for whatever reason, nobody's business. And they just want to lay low. They don't want to do interviews. They don't want to put out music. They don't want to go on that. And that's totally cool. And then, as you guys know, there's artists that are like, hey, just amping up their interaction with fans and putting out more video type stuff, or doing like a variety show like Hawksley Workman did Hawksley Night in Canada, and Sam Coffey does some really cool stuff. And so there's a lot of people doing stuff like that, and that's really cool too. So I think it really depends what's going on, because I'm not gonna put out a media announcement. Media guys get, Juliette, I'm sure you get a bajillion PRs a day. I'm not going to put out a PR that says, hey, Sam Coffey's going to eat some soup on his socials tonight at 6 p.m. That's a waste of that's not something, we need to announce as a band. But so, yeah, I think it really depends on where the artist is at, and also how they're feeling.
It's so touch and go, and it can be really difficult. And I know that, especially in the beginning, everyone everywhere was doing something cool and creative, and, finding a way to pivot and doing an online show or, whatever. Right. But I think it's tough, like this far in now, to kind of keep that motivation sometimes.
Oh, it absolutely is. It is. I would find it challenging to be creative.
Yeah.
But then you have like Eamon McGrath, who I adore and we work with. He wrote me a few months ago. He's like, I've written 3 albums.
Oh my God, good for him. Oh my God.
You are. He's just so prolific, and just so, he's just got a wonderful personality. But someone else is not like, and that's all okay. We just take the lead.
There's no right way or wrong way to handle it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's been the sort of big lesson of this entire thing, is that there's no one size fits all model. Everyone's doing what they can do or doing nothing, and that's okay too. It's just, it's just what it is.
Yeah.
So beyond your work as a music publicist, I want to talk a bit about your fabulous podcast that's been going for 1 trillion years at this point. And you guys have like a billion episodes. I've never seen a podcast with this many episodes before. So
yes,
it's called,
I have to note that you have a way better microphone than us, which just says that your podcast is
legit,
more legitimate than Music in Paranoid Times. Not to discredit our hard work here, but
I'll send you guys a picture of the studio. It's actually really, it's pretty cool. We have like a signed Bill Burr poster and a signed Mary poster and a signed like Radiolab thing. It's really fun. Yeah, I used to call it my secret life. It's not so secret anymore. I use my married name on the show. So And the reason why I sort of kept it separate was because of the nature of the show too. And we work with a lot of artists and stuff. And I just want to keep stuff separate, but I'm very proud of being on this podcast. It's called The Reality Check. And it's, I do it with 3 other people. One is my husband, he's the producer, and 2 guys out of Ottawa. And basically it's a weekly show where we cover controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. That's pretty much the hook for the show. And we've had some really amazing guests on. We talk about space stuff with our planetary scientist friend who's part of the New Horizons NASA.
Which is so cool.
Which is so cool. I know. Never would I ever have a friend like that if I didn't do this podcast. And actually, Ed Robertson from Bare Naked Ladies came over when this friend was in town staying with us, because he lives in Colorado. And if you know anything about Ed, he's a space junkie. He's good friends with Commander Hadfield. So that was really, really cool to have him here and be part of that process. But we do, we cover anything from like conspiracies to bad wellness advice, just food myths, just any, I guess in a lot of ways we kind of try to debunk bullshit.
I love it. Great tagline.
Debunk bullshit. And even just like, don't give grapes to dogs. You should never give grapes. So sometimes it's like more of a PSA. So yeah.
I love it. And where can our audience find The Reality Check?
You can find The Reality Check anywhere you can find podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere. And it's trcpodcast.com is our website. Check it out.
How many episodes deep are you guys right now?
I think it's 21. I'm telling you, Al, I'm staring at the thing right now. The mix, I'll pull it down for you. We got this in 2018. I'm very proud of it because we beat Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was in our category. His show Star Talk. It's the 2018 Mixcloud Online Radio Awards. We won for Best Online Talk Show in Science and Technology.
That's incredible. Good for you guys.
It's stupid.
But that's like the best though.
Yeah. Because we've been doing this bit. We finally finished it. We were doing this bit for a while that was like, and we were really hoping to have Neil deGrasse Tyson on, but we've run out of time, like that bit that Jimmy
Kimmel
does with
Matt Damon.
Hoping it would get his attention, but no, not yet.
Well, this is the ultimate kick in the pants then. You just beat him out in this podcast category.
Yeah. We like to finish off every episode with a rapid fire segment. If you would be so inclined to answer these rapid fires. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
It's going to be great.
The first album that you purchased.
Something New by the Beatles. I have actually Tanya from the Horseshoe. She's the bar manager. Love her. She used to work for me a while back. She has my whole Beatles vinyl collection. She has ownership of it. And I could actually call her right now and say, could you take out that record? And because I wrote on it for, money for best report card 1982. I just remember having that on the sleeve. So it was funny enough. I mean, I had music before then. My mom bought me the Grease record when I was in grade 4, which was amazing. But that was the first record I bought.
What was the album or artist that defined your youth?
I'm going to have to go with the Beatles because we're talking preteen. My dad, huge music file, got my love of music from my dad. When I was 8, they took me to see Johnny Cash.
Oh, amazing.
They were huge. He was just a huge rock and roll guy. So just an incredible collection. And he had Beatle records, but I was like, meh. I was 11. I wasn't really into at 11 an artist, right? And then I saw this movie called I Want to Hold Your Hand. I think it's a fictional movie. It's about a bunch of kids who are trying to get into the Ed Sullivan Theater.
Watch a performance.
To watch the first performance in America. And I just lost it. When I watched that movie, I don't know what happened, but it just resonated with me, and just like this feverish thing happened. And then I was just grabbing my dad's records, and that was it. So I'd have to say as a preteen, I probably have to pick the Beatles.
Big up to the musical dads, by the way.
Oh my gosh, no kidding. Yeah.
Best concert you've ever been to?
Easy.
Can
I tell a little story?
Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously I've seen a lot of incredible concerts, and I've done publicity for Riot Fest the 3 years, and Rogers Picnic and a lot of Wake Stock stuff. So I've been I was in the pit for Prodigy at Riot Fest. It was just
amazing.
crazy.
We were there.
Yeah, they were there.
Right?
Yeah, we played that day. Yeah.
Yeah. So, however, I have to say I was working DFA 1979 at the time, 2017. Way Home. They were playing Way Home.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day, someone named Frank Ocean was playing Way Home.
Oh, hey.
I love Frank Ocean so much. You could ask anyone who knows me if you're like, it's going to be Frank Ocean.
Wow.
So I drove back Sunday. I didn't have any purpose to be there from a work perspective on the Sunday, but I drove back, which is about an hour from Toronto, where the Way Home Festival was. And my son, who was 20 at the time, was there camping out with his friends, ditched all of his friends, came to meet me. And then him and I had this beautiful, we found our spot, and we just had this beautiful concert moment together watching Frank Ocean. So,
you're a cool mom. I mean, that's cool. That's
Frank Ocean, how often does he tour too? He's got to be. So yeah, that was one of the most incredible shows I've ever, been at, for just the whole vibe and
the moment was memorable, being with your son and just having
he just arm around me, singing the words to each other. Yeah, so it was very, very meaningful show too. Actually, sitting backstage in the afternoon, and then I came out, and I kind of looked back because there was a black Escalade came, and I was like, and I was just a little ways from it, and Frank got out with his little knapsack. And I just felt like such a fangirl. I mean, but what was I going to say to him anyways? Hey, Frank, I really like your stuff. It's so, I know we work in the industry, so we get it, right? It's kind of strange.
There's also the fear of meeting your quote unquote idols that you might ruin something. You deal with artists all the time. Mm-hmm. If any of the artists that you worked with, have you been a really big fan that when you've worked with them, you're a little bit starstruck? Has that ever happened with you?
I was starstruck when I met David Bowie, but that was really early on.
That's cool.
And I, to your point, I was a little bit worried. I had this moment where I thought, what if he's a jerk? I didn't expect him to be a jerk because, I knew from Annie Wilson, who worked so closely with him, that he was such a cool guy. But I was a little bit weirded out, when, cause we were treated like royalty because of Anya. When he saw her, he just ran across the room to hug her, so it was
amazing.
Pretty wild. But I'm trying to think, there's certainly been moments where, I remember being in high school and going to see The Cult.
Ooh.
And Billy Idol, and just, listening to that Cult record over and over and over again, and just, never imagining that I was going to be at Strombo's house talking to Ian Astbury,
that's
cool. And, explaining what was going to go down. So it was different. I wasn't starstruck, but it was just kind of
it's a moment.
Isn't it funny how these things kind of, but
fair.
Definitely at Bright Fests and stuff, it's, you have this moment where you're like, oh, but your professionalism kicks in. You're on a red carpet. There's famous people there. You just, they're just human beings after all.
So when we were at Riot Fest, we were hanging out and we saw Rivers Cuomo right before they were
I remember that.
And I tried to introduce myself to Mr. Rivers Cuomo, and he was not having any of it. Just didn't, walked right by me as if I didn't exist. My relationship with listening to Weezer changed.
It changes it.
It does.
Because you have such an emotional connection with the music, right? And you want it to mean so much and be meaningful. And that's my fault, because I should have just left Rivers alone.
But you know what? At the same time, he could have just been having a bad day.
Exactly.
Totally.
And I've heard of situations where I know I've had an artist who was leaving something, and fans were, and it was out of the country. I can't remember where it was. It wasn't in the States. It was somewhere else. Then online, they were super critical, saying they didn't even stop to say hi or whatever. And I felt so bad because I knew the artist was really suffering from some back issues.
For sure.
Like just that at that moment, that day, just in a lot of pain. So they were, but what are you going to do? Get on online and say,
like you said, everyone's human, right?
Yeah. And haters are going to hate, as we know. So what are you going to do? Back in the day, because when I was doing some stuff with Sony, Rage Against the Machine came and did a private show at Phoenix for concert winners and stuff. So I had a mandate to get a t-shirt signed for my husband's birthday. He wasn't my husband at the time. Pretty sure this is one of the things that may have led
Sealed the deal. Sealed the deal was the signed Rage shirt.
And that was a really cool experience because I remember like Zach De La Rocha, because my husband's name is Roach. His last name is Roach. You see Zach on stage, and then in this situation, he's got his hoodie, and I'm introduced to him, and he's just so peaceful, such a nice dude.
Super zen.
Yeah. And then I said, this is, and he goes, Roach was my nickname when I was a kid. That's so cool. So I've got it upstairs. I'll send you a picture, Juliette.
I love that.
I've got a t-shirt signed, and he's like, happy birthday, Roach. And yeah, it was pretty, really, really cool. So obviously those interactions with those artists do enhance your listening pleasure in the same way that if you have kind of a negative interaction, it does, like you said, Al, it does affect how you feel about bands.
Ruined Weezer for you.
Okay, back to the rapid fire.
Yes.
Song you wish you wrote.
One of my favorite songs is Street Spirit by Radiohead. Radiohead is one of my favorite.
Yes.
It's like Radiohead, Frank Ocean. Maybe that song, just because of the way that song makes me feel. And I've read that song is very challenging for Tom York to sing.
Some parting words, some advice for artists or bands in the music industry, or they're just, trying to find their way. What would you say to them? I
think one piece of advice I would say is this industry is small. Don't shit talk other people. Don't shit talk other bands.
Yep.
If that's your shtick, okay, fine. Just don't do it, because it serves no purpose. It makes you look kind of petty. It'll come back to haunt you.
Yeah, what goes around comes around. That's for sure.
Yeah. So I've also, I've seen band people, say something in an interview that they thought they were being kind of clever, and it's just come back to bite them in the butt. Or they're on the horn with me saying, can we get that retracted? And I'm like, dude.
Not in this day and age.
What do you want me to do? So that's probably one thing. The other thing I'd say is, I feel if you're talented and you work hard and you keep at it, and you have good people around you, you surround yourself with good people, that you'll probably make it to a point where you're a legit musician, artist, potentially making a living, but you have a fan base. And I think if you keep at it, and I think you just have to realize it's a process. It's going to take time. It's always really frustrating when you see a young band that is, I remember George from Alexa on Fire telling a story about them and Monine were playing this show, and the opening band, so like whoever, Monine, Alexis, whatever it was, showed up in a bus. Ooh. And they were like, a bus, it just seems so ass backward. I think you need to focus on your music, getting it out there, relationships you have with people, and those other things will fall into place or come together. So I think if this is really, 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 really what you want to do, I honestly think if you keep doing it, at some point you will get some reward.
I think that at the heart of it, that's what it has to be about.
Oh, yeah. For sure. You look at Arkells, they're obviously a big Canadian success story. I was their first publicist, and I worked with them up until when they went to Universal. Mm-hmm. And just, lovely human beings, obviously. And it took a few months before people were paying attention. Mm-hmm. Same with the Lumineers. Oh Hey had not come out yet. And I was pitching, they were doing some shows in Canada. And, obviously people didn't care as much until that song went cuckoo pants. So I always tell artists, like, it takes time. You have to be patient. It's planting seeds. There's one PR, then another PR, and then another announcement. You do a show and you just keep building upon it. It's just not going to happen overnight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Juliette, do you have anything else?
I think we covered it. That was a lovely conversation.
That was. Thank you so much for taking the time to do
guys.
this, and we will see you next time.